internet friends, my name is Catherine and I'm the human behind Christian Miss Butcher. And what we do on this channel is we play with dyes, with colors, with fiber. We are experimenting color theories and we're having a lot of fun with fiber arts in general. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go a little chaotic and we're going to be speckling two different ways. So we're going to see if we put the dyes that we want to use to the speckle. Was that a proper wording? I don't know. So we're going to see if putting all the dice together to speckles will affect the final result versus putting every colors separately layer by layer. But we're also going to be testing if adding either citric acid or pickling salt will impact the final result. So compared from directly from the dye jars versus with the salt and or the citric acid. I'm probably going to do a mix of citric acid and pickling salt within the same little mixes just to have different textures and different sizes of speckles onto our yarn. So without further ado, let's get into this. So here are the photos. Here are the colors that I've chosen. So we have silver gray, pistachio, pink orchid, and hyacinth. So the main reason I'm choosing those three colors is because they don't usually split when we are speckling with them to begin with. So this is something that you need to understand and know when you're speckling what will split and not. And for this experimentation, I didn't want to use colors like Colourpop because I know that Colourpop will split. So this is why we are going with colors that we know for sure that they don't normally split when they are being used for speckling. So I already have my jars ready to add the citric acid. I'm going to be adding a tiny bit of it to like this, and I'm going to be adding the same amount in each of the jars. For this, roughly the same, and we're going to be adding also the colors afterwards, but I'm just going to add, ooh, this is a lot. Okay, so this is for the experiment with the thing. I just need to do another one for all the colors. I'm going to try to put those extra grain of salt into my container. I should probably buy just a container for this instead of having a huge hole in there. Okay, so I'm going to be adding also a little bit of citric acid in this one so that we can have a rough idea of what it looks like. Okay, so this will be for the mixed one, so I'm just going to put it right next to the other one. So we're good with the citric acid now. So now next thing we're going to do is put on our respirator because we only have one pair of lungs and we need to protect them. It doesn't have to be this brand specifically. You just need to make sure it's a respirator that will make a barrier between the fine particles so you don't breathe any of the fine particles from the dyes. Okay, so let's do this, my friends. Okay, so let's start with our silver gray, and I'm going to be adding just one little scoop in each of my things, so we have roughly the same amount. I might not be using the whole thing, you know, we shall see. So next we're doing the pistachio in every single one of them. And yes, I'm putting the thing like this so I know I've used it. Sometimes, I say sometimes, I try to be good and do things in a smart way that will avoid mistakes. And sometimes I still make mistakes, even when I'm trying to avoid it. So we're going to have all the colors everywhere. So I feel like the colors Once they're all mixed, it might create something very interesting. We shall see. Just trying to mix. I could also use my spoons that I use, right? That would make sense, right? Okay, and we're going to mix. I'm very curious to see what the difference going to look like. A little mix. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to be keeping my respirator because everything will be open. And now we're gonna go into the dye pans. Okay, I still have my mask on. Here we have 5 cups of tap water with citric acid, and I'm going to be adding my skeins of yarn that I've pre-soaked in citric acid to help with the absorption of the dyes. So I'm just going to quickly add them into our pan, and here we will have what I call my yarn mop. Because I will be speckling, I will need to wash off any excess dye from my glove hands to avoid cross-contamination between the jars. Perfect. So now we've got everything here. So I'm using also my superwash yarn, which is my plastic sock, 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon. It's an 8-ply and I absolutely love it. Okay, so we're going to turn on the heat right away, so that way everything can start to strike as fast as possible. Because if you want to speckle, you want also to make sure that you have a quick strike onto the color. Okay, so we're going to start. This side will be the side that we pull straight from the jars, and then this side will be the side with the salt and the what's the word, the salt and the citric acid. Why did I forget that? I don't know. So we're going to start with the all mixed together, and when you're speckling, you want to make sure that you do not separate your fingers, because you will end up with a large clump of color. And I can already tell you that we are going to have a very interesting color here. This is so cool. See here, I have a larger clump of color. This is so interesting. The hyacinth seem to have overpowered everything. Interesting. Look at that. I think I'm going to just... This is so interesting. Huh. Wow. Okay, that was fun and unexpected. So now we're going to compare it with separating the layers. Because honestly, I was expecting the colors to actually split. And I think that I can see some of the pink orchid here and there, but not that much. We don't see a whole lot of them. So now we're going to do one layer of the silver gray. And then we're going to go in with our pistachio. I'm just making sure to dry my hands after putting them in the water, so that way I can make sure to not incorporate any moisture into my jars of dyes, because that would not be fun. Now we're going to go into the pink orchid. I am kind of really liking the colors so far together. And obviously, the colors will develop a little bit better after uh, they had time to cook a little bit. So, and now we're going to do the hyacinth. Here we go. Hyacinth is done for this guy. We can already see that the pink orchid is starting to split a tiny bit on this side. And here the speckles of pistachio are the one right here. I think we've lost the pistachio in here. But it's not over until it's cleaned off, well, cooked, cleaned off, and dried. So now we're going to do the same experimentation, but with our little containers with citric acid and with the pickling salt. And I'm very curious to see if we're going to have a little bit more separation on this guy. Okay. Interestingly, we have one speckle of the pink orchid here. Okay, so now let's do, okay, so it's a little high, so I'm just going to turn down the heat a tiny bit because we don't want this to go too intense. Okay, so now let's start with our silver gray. And here you can see that it's either the silver gray that is split a tiny bit with the blue speckles here, or it's in the hyacinth, there is that blue that I didn't see before. And if you're wondering what I do with my yarn mop, I usually put them in my $25 bins at market, so that way people can still enjoy some lovely hand-dyed yarn at a slightly discounted price. Perfect. I think I'm going to turn this guy here so we can try to have colors on both sides. Perfect. Now we only have pink orchid left in our hyacinth. One thing I'm noticing with the citric acid and pickling salt mix is that I don't use as much of it as if I'm doing it directly from the jar. This was hot. I should not have done that. Sorry. And now, last but not least, we're going to do our yacite hyacinth. Perfect. Just going to finish this. Perfect. Okay, so now that we don't have any dry dye, I will be able to remove my respirator. Phew. Oh, that was nice. It was getting hot in here. Okay, so I'm just going to do a countdown for 30 minutes. There we go. So we're going to cook this for 30 minutes. The speckle will need to be settled for 45 minutes afterwards. And then we're going to let it finish cooling down and wash it off. But my first impression so far, so this created this like almost grape jelly color. Same for this one. However, like I was expecting, we have a tiny bit more separation here than we have here, which I was expecting. And here the speckle are obviously smaller, and compared to here where we have splotches here and there, because it's just the nature of dye when you're speckling um, with the jars directly into the pan. So there's that. But it is an interesting find. It is interesting result. Um, so we're going to let this cook, and we're going to come back and see what's up with everything. So I did turn down a little bit the heat just to make sure that we're not burning the yarn, especially when we're speckling. So I will see you in about an hour and a half. Okay, so here it's been 30 minutes. We're turning off the heat for both the yarn mop and for the actual skeins. So now that we had time to see the colors develop a little bit, you can see here and there a tiny speck of blue coming most likely from the hyacinth. You can see that hyacinth is kind of overpowering those two, which are the mixed stuffed. However, we can see that some of the pink orchid is trying to shine through, which was to be expected, I think. And we're going to see once everything is washed off what it looks like. So I'm going to let this cool and settle for another 45 minutes, and then we're going to be washing off any excess dye, and I will see you later. And now it's time to wash off any excess dye from the skeins we dyed earlier today. So it is very important to do this step, especially when it comes to speckled yarn, because sometimes you can have clumps of dry powder decide to stay dry and just accumulate onto the yarn, and we don't want that when we are knitting or crocheting or weaving or however you want to be using your yarn. So I'm just going to let this soak a little bit, roughly 10 minutes, and we're going to come back and see if we need to do a second soak. Okay, let's take a look. I think we should be fine. I'm going to try to remove a little bit of the excess water, and I'm going to put this in my spin dryer so we can remove all excess water and let it dry overnight. And now we're just going to let soak our yarn mop, which looks pretty funky. And we are good. Oh no, my glove is full of water now. Oh well, that's life. So in the spin dryers it goes, and we're going to let it dry overnight, and I will see you tomorrow for the final result. And here's the final result of our experiment with mixing the dyes and doing the speckling separately. So huge shout out to AE Price 2904. So this is because of your comment that we've done this experiment, and if you're someone who's interested in seeing experimentations done on this channel, you can leave a comment. If I do not respond to the comment or acknowledge it with a like, I haven't seen it, so you're more than welcome to send me an email and I will see what I can do to make it happen. So here, like I said while we were dyeing, basically some of the pink orchid did shine through the yarn. However, we've created a purple, a very beautiful purple nonetheless. This is very pretty. Where with layering each speckles separately, we can see that we have all the different colors on here. So we can see the gray, we can see the pink orchid, we can see our hyacinth. Was it hyacinth that I used? I can't remember. And we can see some speckles of the pistachio. Pistachio seems to be very pale compared to the other ones, but we still can see it here and there. And I thought that with adding the pickling salt and adding the citric acid, we might be able to see some of the speckles, even though we've mixed everything together. We can see some of the silver gray. Is it silver gray? Yeah, that we've used, and some speckles of the pink orchid. However, it is definitely more of a purple that we've obtained, just like this one. And here we can still see the things slightly better. It is a little bit more defined. However, with the pistachio, since it is a color that disappears itself from everything, we've lost it compared to here. So when we are doing our experimentation with directly from the jar and we are not moving our fingers like this, we have bigger splotches compared to when we have it mixed with the citric acid and the pickling salt. And so when you're coming with a color that will fade itself into another one, I would say that doing it directly from the jar is probably a best bet compared to mixing it with salt and or citric acid, so you can actually see it. So depending on how you want to do your things, it's probably best to go directly from the jar with colors like that. So this is just a little opinion. And look at our yarn mop, how pretty that is. I absolutely adore this color. It is so pretty. So this will go into my discount bins at markets, and maybe some of you will get it at some point. So I hope you've liked the video, and if you did, please consider sharing, liking, and subscribing, and I will see you next one very soon. Bye!